Welcome to Lutherans Alive. This is the program that seeks to tell the stories of Lutheran Christians and our ministries here in southwestern Pennsylvania, believing that God is doing wonderful things through us and in the communities in which we live. I'm Pastor Tony Schneck, and today on the program I am joined by Pastor Jack Hernstrom. Pastor Hernstrom happens to serve two congregations, the Linwood Lutheran Church in Bell Vernon and St. Andrew Lutheran Church in Brownsville. Welcome, Jack, to the program today.
Thank you.
Jack's going to speak to us today about a trip that he took a few years ago. Jack, you want to tell us where it is that you went?
We went to Madagascar, and it was a very eye-opening trip, and we had it was a very worthwhile trip to meet the people there, especially the people in our companion synod. Mm-hmm. It was interesting seeing a third world country that I've never been in before. It was probably the strangest place I've ever been. It was kind of like the Old West in many ways. Most of the people were farmers. Since then, there's been a lot of political unrest in Madagascar. We flew into Antananarivo, the capital, and met with the people there, and then we went south to the main Lutheran seminary, and there's one main Lutheran seminary and 8 others. One is in the Bazet town. They were very faithful people. They come from a Norwegian tradition. The Norwegians came over in the late 1800s, and there was an English presence before that. And the missionaries there had a struggle. The first 4 English missionaries that went, 3 of them died within a month, and the other one survived and went on to found the Protestant church there. And then the Norwegian Lutherans from Norway came in the 1880s, and then the Norwegian churches in America started sending people over. So they have a long tradition of very faithful service, very Nordic insofar as their services last about 3 hours long, okay? And no one seems to be in a hurry to leave. You know, of course, they don't have the NFL, but they sing maybe 10 hymns during a service, take 3 or 4 offerings, have announcements, and then, and of course, readings and a sermon. So it was, and the churches were, the ones at least we had went to, were large churches. There's about 3 million Lutherans in Madagascar, and it's one of the fastest growing churches in the world.
It might be helpful for some of our viewers to understand a bit about what exactly is that companion relationship like that we have with this other group of Lutherans mm-hmm. on the other side of the world, mm-hmm. Where the church is, as you say, growing very quickly, mm-hmm. Not only in Madagascar, but in Africa as well, in the mainland mm-hmm. there. But could you say a bit about that companion relationship that we here in southwestern Pennsylvania have with the Tuliar Synod of the Malagasy Lutheran Church?
Well, the way it began was when they started the idea of companion synods. They had a meeting of the bishops, and Bishop McCoy looked at the map and said, well, we're southwestern Pennsylvania, this is southwestern Madagascar. Mm-hmm. And so that's how we ended up being connected with that synod. We have, every couple of years we try to send people down. Sometimes it's a mission trip where we actually build something. Sometimes it's just to keep track of. And it's a two-way relationship. It's not just us, the big country, giving to them, but also they're actually very helpful in building faith for us that go there, because we see what they do is so little, and they don't. Most people don't have hymnals. They've memorized all the hymns, so And all the people that we met were very friendly. They were very devout, and they also have a thing called a Tubi, which is a kind of a revival camp. The people stay there full time. We were able to visit one of them while we were there. They're also very much involved in healthcare. They have, I believe, around 80 hospitals and clinics that they support. We have a trip every couple of years down there, and I think they've had some people over here, but not lately.
Some of the leaders of the Tuliar Synod have visited our territory here in southwestern Pennsylvania, but I believe it has been a little while.
It's been a while, yes.
And you say you found the people to be very faithful and devout, even staying in worship up to 3 hours.
Yes.
That's tremendous.
And of course, no air conditioning, and no heat either. But they don't need, although the temperatures do go down a little, it's, the climate was much like around here, but we were on the upper plateau of Madagascar, whereas down around the coast, you see more of the, what we would consider rainforests. So we were mostly up on the upper plateau. The Madagascar's, if you didn't know, I didn't know a thing about Madagascar until I heard about our companion synod. I had to look on a map to see where it was. And it's off the east coast of Africa. It has it's the fourth largest island in the world, about the size of California. And population, I believe, around 20 million. And about 10 million live in the capital, which is Antananarivo, but a lot of people shorten it to Tana.
And how many people made the trip with you? You went with a group of folks?
Yes,
how many
there
were
were
with you?
eight of us. Jim Vigan and his wife, myself, my son Benjamin, who's a filmmaker, went with us. We spent a lot of time we actually took a van, rented a van, and went down south and saw most of the center of the island. We saw things happening that just make you wonder how we can have so much and not appreciate it. One story that I love to tell is that on our way back up to Antananarivo, we stopped. We had packaged our lunches, and it used to be a French colony, so you have French bread with everything. So it was a day-old French bread, so we threw a piece of it out into a field. And a workman who was working on a village nearby came and looked at us to get permission to take that piece of bread. And so we gave him a whole loaf, whatever we had left. But we don't even think about things like that here. Main exports are graphite and vanilla, and sisal, which is a kind of a fiber that you make rope with. Let's see what else. Again, the two big crops. Well, the biggest crop, of course, was rice, because a lot of the people originally came from Indonesia. So, and the other one is they had zebu, which are water buffalo. So that was a mainstay of their country. And the more zebu you had, the richer you were.
Thanks for what you've shared so far about Madagascar. We would love to hear more after we take time for a short break.
Okay.
Welcome back to Lutherans Alive. We continue our conversation with Pastor Jack Hernstrom. Pastor Hernstrom is speaking with us about a trip to Madagascar that he took a while back. our companion synod, the Tuliar Synod of the Malagasy Lutheran Church. There are faithful Lutheran people on that island. Could you say a few words about them, Jack? Well, how do you see God at work in the lives of the faithful Christian people that you met while you were there?
I think it's a matter of, and I mean this in a good way, that they have a simple religion. I think the climate and the ecology fit more with Palestine in Jesus' time than our modern world. And they have Tubi that we went to. They had probably a couple hundred people there, and then another couple of people listening on to the Bible study on loudspeakers. You know, in our churches, you know, if you get 10, 15 people, you know, that's a great Bible study, depending on the size of the church, of course. I learned how much the missionaries and how much they went through to establish things down there. Jim Vigan and his wife founded one of the local seminaries, one of the 8 local ones, and then the main seminary is kind of a graduate school for pastors. Interesting enough, it was at Gettysburg, you know, we had a meal plan. I think probably at every seminary in the United States there's kind of a meal plan. Well, at the main seminary in Madagascar, the meal plan was, here's some, a couple acres of land, grow your own food. So, because they're all farmers. So the audiovisual department would, this is more than I saw in all of Madagascar.
No PowerPoint presentations.
No PowerPoint presentations.
No DVD players.
There was internet in a couple. There's an internet shop, an internet cafe in every town. Okay, but the people seemed to rely on each other. I think they had strong family bonds. Again, it's such a different life than we live. It's hard to imagine. Most of them live in brick, like adobe type huts with dirt floors. Even at the seminaries, seminary housing was a little better, but not too much. And again, they flocked to church every Sunday. Had Sunday school. Oh, the music was great. They had huge choirs of teenagers and children. The music was everywhere. And actually they did have sound mixing boards and speakers for the choirs. And we were asked actually to sing a song when we got there. That was a kind of in Malagasy, which is their native language, which was particularly fun to do. We also did some lecturing on ecumenical relations. They're in their Christian populations about a third Lutheran, a third Catholic because of the French presence, which ended in 1960, and the earlier English Protestant presence. But they don't seem to connect at all with each other. I know up in my locale we have 2 different ministeriums, and they were very surprised to find out that we actually went to other churches and visited during Lenten seasons of the church. So they found that very interesting. The main cathedral that we went to was just wooden seats, very plain, except for the sound equipment. They seem to like that a lot. Watching people just simply worship, have wonderful music, but without a lot of, they would walk, most people would walk to church and walk back. And even, I have to admit, 3 hours didn't seem that long in that environment. You know, again, up here, people have a much smaller, what do you call it?
Threshold of attention.
Yes, threshold of attention, exactly. But down there, it was, again, it just seemed wonderful and nice, and I'm trying to get words that would express it best. they were thankful for so many small things, and they were also very much willing to share with us who had so much. I mean, it was embarrassing, to have, what's in my closet at home and what's down there. The pastors wear white shirts and ties, usually dark ties, so we brought probably about, I don't know, 40, 60 ties down with us. But they were very careful. We could not hand them out. The bishops had to hand them out because it gets jealousy, who gets what. I suppose that happens up here too, but somehow down there, because there were so few things that people had. I think if somebody from Madagascar went to Best Buy, they would probably just collapse. From I saw. I think one store had 3 TVs, and it was the only store that dealt with European people, and mostly was storefront shops, and with meat hanging there, no refrigeration. What you killed in the morning, you ate that night. In the capital, although there were some very good French restaurants there that were fun and rather cheap, from our standard at least. But down there, they say if you haven't had rice, you haven't eaten. Again, on the trip we saw hundreds, if not thousands, of rice paddies, and there was a Lutheran church in every town that we were at, and probably more than. And we did not get out into the real bush. There were. Jim Biggin told a story about going down, and he and another missionary were out, and they could only drive so far. Then they had to hike, and then when they finally got to the village they were going to, the people were crying because they hadn't had communion in 2 years. So, but again, we weren't there long enough to experience all of that.
Yeah, that's tremendous. It can be such an enriching thing to visit a place like that so far away and connect with brothers and sisters around the world. More about that and how that's affected you after we take another short break.
Okay.
Welcome back again to Lutherans Alive. We continue our conversation with Pastor Jack Hernstrom about the good, faithful Lutheran Christians in Madagascar and that part of the world. And Jack, tell us, how was it that you came to go on this trip in the first place? What was it that led you to volunteer for this trip or to be on the trip in the first place?
I think what I was interested in going to Madagascar because I like to travel, but really I thought it was a good chance to see the Lutheran Church in a different setting than what we see it here. And I also like to use my photographic skills, and I was able to do a lot with that while I was there. But I found out it was rather difficult because you can't be a visiting pastor and be a photographer at the same time. You can either do one or the other. But the one thing that affected me, I think, for the most, was to realize that sometimes all the things that we have get in the way of being a Christian. That they had very little, and for the most part seemed very happy. Now, that's not to say there's not poverty, because there definitely is poverty there, and there are people that have problems with deafness and blindness from having malnutrition at a young age. We visited school for the deaf and a school for the blind that the Lutheran Church operates. But in the United States, we just kind of take things. We want our church to have this. We want it to have, convenient parking. We want to have convenient times. We want to have a Sunday school. We want to have, I don't know, bell choirs or whatever. Nothing. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but without that, they just tried to lead faithful lives under very, what we would call trying conditions, rather. And I think that it made me see Christianity more from almost a first century standpoint, where people would, walk a long way to get to church. People would, nothing on Sunday morning would interfere with church. I mean, most people didn't have television, and electricity was rather short. Before, I'd like to say a couple things about the infrastructure, if I could. And it's most of the electricity comes from diesel fuel. There's a little hydroelectric, but that's very expensive, and also means that you can't have industry because we depend on our electricity. I stopped on my way here at Ross Park Mall, and I think there's more wealth at Ross Park Mall than in all Madagascar. But it's just I would say getting down to the real basics of what we believe is sometimes, I think we miss a lot. That they appreciate what they have, both in the church and what little material possessions they have.
It calls to mind the words to the song, "'Tis a gift to be simple." And and Jesus reminded us in the scriptures and cautioned us, warned us, in fact, about becoming too attached to the things of this world, to possessions and the love of money, and to be thankful, to have thankful hearts, and to put our trust not in the things of this world, but to put our trust in God. And I can see, I've never been to Madagascar, but I can sort of see just from what I heard from you and from others who have been there, that there's a certain sense in which there's a trust in God there, that He will provide, and that it's okay to live a simpler life, and we can still be connected to God. In fact, in some ways, much more connected to God, without all of these other things, as you say, in the way.
One thing it would be interesting to do, I don't know if I'll ever get a chance to, would be to be in Madagascar during the Christmas season or during the Easter season. Christmas season down there would be very hot, because that would be their hot summer time, so that would make for a different type of trip. But to see what there's so many traditions, and so many are tied to the Norwegian church.
I was wondering if you could, thank you for all that you've shared about the church in Madagascar. I was wondering if you could, in the little bit of time that we have remaining, say a word or two about the congregations where you serve in the communities of Bell Vernon and Brownsville. Where can folks find you and your flock there?
Let's see. Well, we'll start with Brownsville. Brownsville, there. You go up the hill. There's a church street that has seven churches on it. The first time I had visited Brownsville when I was in seminary, I went to try and find the place because I was going to preach there as a part of my not internship, but pre-internship. But anyway, I kept looking on Church Street, and I had to find a policeman to say where it is. So it's up on the corner of Angle and High and Angle Street. It was began in 1938, and Brownsville has had many economic difficulties. Their hospital shut down, and then I just heard on the news the other day someone was in there trying to steal the copper out of it. So they have, and there's a problem with with drugs in Brownsville. They're just having a rough time of it. I hope they complete the Mon Valley Expressway, because that would change life in Brownsville dramatically.
And Bell Vernon as well?
Well, Bell Vernon is a little different. Bell Vernon is on right on Route 70. I call it the Breezewood of the West. They have hotels there, motels, and a little larger congregation. And Bell Vernon is a growing community. So that makes it's kind of, I have to kind of do a switch when I go from one to the other. But they're both wonderful people at both churches. So I just couldn't say enough. And I've been there, let's see, in July it'd be 8 years, which I find very to give a sense of stability in those churches. I think I was very happy to be able to do that.
We're thankful that you're serving there. We're thankful for your being here with us today on Lutherans Alive and for sharing about the trip to Madagascar, and thankful for the faithful Lutheran people there. And thank you for being with us on Lutherans Alive today. We know that wherever you happen to be watching from, in your community or near your community, there is a congregation of Lutheran Christians who would be pleased to welcome you. I'm Pastor Tony Schneck. Thanks again. See you next time.